All right, thank you, Aye. Let's move to the cash flow statement, which tells us how money moved in and out of the company.
Transcorp Hotels, it generated approximately 20 billion naira from its operating activities for the year 2024.
Hello, welcome to the Nigerian Investors podcast, the unofficial podcast that tracks and reports on the activities of the Nigerian boss. My name is Mudi, and with my colleague Aye, we will be hosting this podcast. TNI podcast is dedicated to stimulating a renewed enthusiasm among the general population with regard to the activities of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Ultimately, the goal of TNI is to see that many Nigerians from all walks of life, both at home and in the diasporas, become active participants on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Before we go further, we would like to place on record TNI podcast is solely for educational purposes and not a replacement for professional financial advice. Let's begin. Welcome back to the Nigerian Investor, your go-to podcast for breaking down financial reports and making investment decisions simpler. I am Mudi.
And I'm Aye. Today we're diving deep into the 2024 financial statement of Transcorp Hotels. If you're an investor or just curious about how top Nigerian companies manage their money, this episode is for you.
That's right. We've got the audited, consolidated, and separate statements of financial positions, the changes in equity, and the cash flow statement. We're putting it all together for a full picture analysis of their financial health.
Alright, now for this first section, we want to check how the business performed for the year 2024. Now let's break down Transcorp Hotels' profitability. And to do that, we're going to start with revenue. Then we'll look at how much the company kept as gross profit and operating profit.
In 2024, the company reported 17.1 billion naira in revenue, a massive jump from 41.5 billion naira in 2023. That is about a 69% increase in the top line earnings, showing strong demand and growth.
Interestingly enough, revenue growth also led to higher gross profits. In 2024, they made 49.7 billion in gross profits compared to 29.8 billion in 2023.
Yeah, now if you're looking at it from percentage angle, that translates to a gross profit margin of 71% in 2024 compared to 71.8% in 2023. This is a slight drop, meaning that while revenue grew, the cost of sales increased too.
Right, that's true, Mudi. Cost of sales actually increased from 11.7 billion in 2023 to 20.4 billion in 2024. So even though the company made more money, expenses tied to operations like raw materials, utilities, and services also went up as well.
Next, let's talk about the operating profit. This is what is left after deducting all the cost of running the business, like paying salaries, paying for rent, and marketing.
In 2024, Transcorp recorded 26 billion in operating profit. That's almost double the 13.1 billion that they made in 2023. That's a 98% increase, getting a very strong performance in operating profit.
Now, Aye, let's quickly look at the bottom line. The profit for the year. The company more than doubled its net profit from 6.3 billion naira in 2023 to 14.9 billion naira in 2024.
So given all these numbers we've thrown at you, what's the big takeaway? Revenue and profits are growing at an impressive rate, but investors should watch out how cost of sales impacts margins in the coming years. Remember, we have explained that the company has to keep some of the revenue it makes in gross profit and then keep some of those profits it makes in net profit. And what affects that are the costs. from the cost of sales to the operational cost to the financial cost down to taxes. And when these costs tend to grow faster than revenue, we will tend to see the margins shrink. In the case of Transcorp, the margins only shrink slightly because cost of sales did grow slightly faster than revenue. But as long as the company is able to keep costs down, profitability should stay good in the future.
What test do we have for our listeners?
Yeah, thank you, Mudi. So let's also get into the balance sheet, right? Also called the statement of financial position. This will give us a snapshot of what the company owns, what the company owes, and what the company would keep after all its liabilities are paid. In other words, what the company would keep in equity.
Okay, Aye. So for 2024, Transcorp Hotels reported a total asset of 140.6 billion naira for the group. That is a solid asset base if you look at it from all angles, reflecting investment in property, equipment, and other holdings.
On the equity side of things, the group recorded 80.5 billion naira worth of shareholders' equity. This means a good portion of the assets are funded by shareholders' equity rather than debt.
And speaking about debt, total liabilities came in at 60.2 billion. So while they do carry some debt, their balance sheet remains relatively strong, of which they had long-term borrowings of 8.7 billion naira and short-term borrowings of 7.3 billion naira.
Now let's look at how equity changed over the past year, right? This will tell us how the company handled profits, losses, and shareholder distributions.
In 2023, Transcorp Hotels started the year with 62.8 billion naira in equity, made about 6.1 billion naira in profit, and ended at 66.8 billion naira after deductions for dividends and other distributions.
Then in 2024, profits surged to 14.9 billion naira. That's more than double what it was in 2023. And after paid dividends, the group was able to invest some of those profits back in itself in the retained earnings account, like we explained this in previous episodes, and that increased the shareholders' equity to 80.5 billion naira. So the key takeaway is that Transcorp Hotel had a fantastic profit for the year 2024, and that helped it to show up capital and increase its shareholder base, or rather its shareholders' equity. The company was also able to pay dividends to shareholders.
All right, thank you, Aye. Let's move to the cash flow statement, which tells us how money moved in and out of the company. Can you just talk about that more, Aye?
Thank you, Moji. Thank you. So this is where we see how much the company generated from its day-to-day operations. And for Transcorp Hotel, it generated approximately 20 billion naira from its operating activities for the year 2024. That's how much cash the company actually generated. And when we say cash, we're referring to actual cash, not accounting cash, or actual cash that flew into the company from its operations for 2024, and that was 20 billion naira. Now let's look at the cash the company actually spent in investing activities, right? This is where things actually get interesting because for Transcorp Hotel, the group actually invested 12.2 billion naira in the purchase of plant property and equipment.
Meanwhile, the company spent a total of 13.8 billion naira on investing activities. This suggests that the group is making some strategic moves at consolidated levels.
Now let's look at where money was also spent in terms of the financing activities, right? And as we explained in previous episodes, financing activities is where the company records the cash inflows from borrowings, cash outflows from repayment of debts, cash outflows from payment of dividends, and also cash inflows from raising of equity if any equity was raised. Basically, all financing activities that the company carried out within a period of time that is being recorded. And for Transcorp, they actually paid out 8 billion naira in loans. They actually paid out 2.5 billion naira in interest. They also paid 1.3 billion naira in dividends. And when we talk about dividends here, we're not talking about the 2024 dividends. We're talking about the 2023 dividends that were paid in 2024. As we know, 2024 dividends will be paid in 2025. So it paid out 1.3 billion naira in dividends last year to reflect 2023. But the company also borrowed a new 3.4 billion naira and added that to its balance sheet.
That means that their cash outflow for financing was 10.3 billion naira, showing a focus on reducing debt. It is a smart move, but it did put a dent in their cash reserves.
So, what are the key takeaways that we think investors should get from all this breakdown, right? So, let's look at them. So, profitability was very, very strong. Profit actually doubled in the year 2024, which is a great sign for long-term growth for the company and also a positive sign for investors. Cash flow was actually very, very healthy. The company did generate positive cash flow from its operations, and as we've seen, the company was able to use that cash flow to fund acquisition of property, plant, and equipment. And even some of that cash flow even trickled downwards. The company was able to pay down some of its debt, pay interest, even pay dividends, and borrowed some extra money. And like Moody said, the company actually had to dip it into its cash and cash equivalents to pay out some of these monies. But it's a positive thing because we saw that the company was able to generate so much cash from operating activities and it was able to actually invest in itself from those cash flows. As with respect to debt, repayments are happening for the year, which reduced its financial risk. It's always a positive thing to see companies reduce their debt position, especially in this high interest rate environment. However, companies will be strategic about how they use debt. So yeah, it's a very positive result we've seen from Transcorp Hotel.
Yeah, that's true. Overall, Transcorp Hotels PLC is looking strong, but investors should keep an eye on how they handle their equity and whether they continue to pay down debts in 2025. That's very, very important.
Very, very true, Moody. Very, very true. And that's a wrap on today's episode. If you found today's analysis very, very useful, don't forget to subscribe to the Nigerian Investor and share this episode with your fellow investors.
And if you have any question, hit us up on social media or drop a comment. We love hearing from you. Until next time, keep investing wisely.
Keep investing wisely indeed.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the favorite podcast that brings insight to the Nigerian stock market. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. To get more episodes like this, follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, as well as on our website. All this information is available in the show note below this episode. Until we bring you another episode your way next week. Bye for now. T&I podcast is executive produced by Mudi. This episode was edited by Rona at Rock Valley Village Studio.